Hello and welcome to another episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff. I'm Mike Evans.
And I'm David Price.
And David, on this week's riff, what are we going to be talking about?
This?
Oh, yes, okay, and this. Why did I get the power amp?
Yeah, well,
God.
you like these kind of things, don't you, Mike?
I do.
Get very excited by big power amps, especially if they've got exposure written on them.
Well, I have a few of these, as we know, which is well documented. We won't go into that.
Let's go into that.
This riff.
So, in the interests of full disclosure, can you tell us what exposure amps you've got in your main system?
Okay, so power amp wise, I've got 3 dual regulated 4s.
Yeah.
Which are the heavier than this actually.
Right.
And then I've got a 5, which is the active crossover.
Right.
And then I've got a 3 9 power supplies, which are even heavier than the 4s.
Right.
And then I've got a 14 preamplifier.
Okay. Well, I was trying to add those all up, but you lost me round about the 14.
In my second system, I've got a 6, 7, and 8 as well. So I'm kind of going through all the numbers pretty much.
Yeah, so you like exposure stuff, don't you?
I'm just a bit disappointed that this is the 3510. You know, what's wrong with their numbering system? Why aren't we up to like 22 or something?
I know.
You know, there we are.
Absolutely.
But this is the 3510 pre-power.
Yes.
And we have reviewed in a previous riff the 3510 integrated amp, which we really liked. We really liked it.
We did.
It's a cracking amplifier, and we were really impressed. Designed by Tony Brady, who doing all the exposure stuff at the moment, and he's sort of a bit of a designer legend now, isn't he? So
he is.
Used to be in the old days. Used to be John Farlow. He used to design everything. My old amps. He did all of those. But really loving the modern stuff, even though it weighs a ton. Really loving this.
Well, I think Tony. The clever thing that Tony's done is he's kept the house sound, hasn't he?
He really has. He really has. Yeah.
So if you listen to name amplifiers of the Julian Verica era, you listen to those 70s and 80s name amps, and you listen to the the later kind of Roy George, Steve Sells type stuff from Name, then there's quite a big difference.
Yes.
But to me, anyway, the exposures are spookily similar.
The essence is there, isn't it? Yeah,
absolutely.
And that was, the names were kind of, back in the day, were quite sort of very punchy, analytical, detailed, etc. And the exposures just had a little bit more of a sort of warm, around the edges sound, without really losing any of the detail.
Yes.
And these are very similar. They're not clinical and hard in any way, shape or form.
No.
They just deliver it really nicely.
Yeah.
So I've been using these with a variety of speakers.
Yes.
And
can I just say a very unusual variety of
very
speakers?
unusual variety of speakers. Yes. So we recently did a riff on the Falcon Acoustics LS35As.
Yep.
So this has been driving those brilliantly.
Yep.
Absolutely fantastic and doing an amazing job. I plugged them into my Linsaras, which is a really difficult load and no problem at all.
Yeah.
And I think there's a reason for that, isn't there? Because here's the elephant in the room: the pre-power is quite a lot more than the integrated.
Yeah.
And it rated as spookily the same power output into 8 ohms.
Yes.
So why would you buy the pre-power?
Well, there we go.
That's the question, isn't it?
So, strangely, the power output is pretty similar into 4 as well. But there is, certainly if you believe Paul Miller's measurements in Hi-Fi News, and I generally very much do, an incy bit more load driving ability on the exposure 3510 power amp, right down into very low loads than there is from the 3510 integrated.
Which is why it drives the Saras so well.
Yeah. It drives pretty much anything very well. We heard the 3510 integrated driving my NS1000s, didn't we?
Yeah.
And it wasn't in the least bit bothered at all.
No, they're not the easiest.
No, they're not.
Loads to drive at all either. No, quite.
So I think it's fair to say that if you have either 3510 integrated or the pre-power, then you can use pretty much any type of speakers with the exception of really difficult ones. But as you were saying, the Falcon Acoustics LS35As are tricky. They're not easy.
No, they're not.
I think they've got a sensitivity of around 83 dB, something like that. Probably even less if you don't believe the manufacturer.
Sure. Often the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just like, who cares? It was going for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a really lovely sound, actually. Very clean and musical. Ever so slightly creamy, I think. Just a tiny bit. It's not as analytical as my Sony TAE86 and N86 pre-power, which is a very kind of forensic high-end pre-power amp. And if you compare that to the exposures are clearly warmer, I think.
Yeah.
And but a very for the money, the idea that you can spend, I think each one is £1,590 at the moment.
Yes.
So you can spend roughly 3,200 quid and get a very high quality pre-power that drives almost everything.
It's not just about the power output, though, is it?
No.
To be fair, because there are some distinct advantages in having two-box system, aren't there? As we all know, and they're very well documented.
Yeah.
So we're isolating big power transformers in here, away from all the delicate instrumentation in the preamp.
Yep.
And taking that to the next step with my Exposure 14 preamp, that doesn't have a power supply in it at all. It's you have to have a massive, great big box parked next door to it. So it's a similar sort of thing, really. But I think for me, the sort of from a design ethos, the priority would be to take the power amp as further away from the preamp, separate housing and all that stuff. So and can we you know what I'm going to ask, don't you? Can I as a bit of a socket botherer? Why are we showing the front panel at all?
Sorry, Mike.
So here we go.
Point of order.
Yes.
I noticed when we both revealed the amps, then you had the sockets to the camera.
I did.
So
why didn't you?
I'm just not going to dwell on this anymore. It could get really horrible. But
we've had a couple of comments as well on this as well. I don't know if you've noticed, but they're not very flattering. I'm not going to say. I'm not going to say any more. Thanks very much. Well, Hi-Fi Riff Raff.
One of them probably wouldn't be repeatable on YouTube.
Nope.
So
we'd be barred.
Yeah.
They're awful lot of connectivity.
Yep.
Loads and loads.
Yeah.
In fact, I've got to say this one actually comes with the exposure moving. This one's got the most exposure moving coil board in, which is an optional extra. You can also have a DAC put into this as well, if you want to. Now, full disclosure, I haven't heard the DAC, but I have heard the moving coil board because I used it with the Lin Select LP12. With the new Lin cartridge, which looks very much like a Lyra cartridge. And that sounded great, really super moving coil stage, which I would expect from Exposure. They've got previous on doing these things.
Certainly have.
But multiple inputs, you're not going to run out of inputs on
5
this.
5 RCA line inputs, as you say, optional moving magnet or moving coil.
Yes.
And an optional DAC module, and the DAC module, and it's white coat and pen in the top pocket time. Is a Wolfson WM8742, which is very old. So even older than it's not even older than your exposures.
We've talked about these Wolfsons a lot, haven't we? And we've said actually how good they can sound if they're implemented well. We're really impressed with them.
I mean, I've not heard the DAC module in this preamp, but I've heard it in earlier iterations of exposures like the 3010 S2D. Hopefully I got that right.
STD.
So how dare you mention Scottish turntables from the late 1970s, Mike? So that's you're giving a game away. That's coming up.
That's a Christmas joke.
Indeed. So anyway, quiet at the back, if I may continue.
Sorry.
So very nice, decent DAC module. It's not as good as I would say a Chord Cutest or something like that.
No.
But it's still very good for the money. It's a very usable thing. And, to really improve, you'd be spending at least a couple of grand or more on a separate DAC, I think, to really get a big improvement. So basically, unlike early exposures, and indeed anything that came out of the UK in the 1980s, it's actually got lots of sockets on the back of it.
Absolutely, and it has it comes with a remote. The remote is functional. I wouldn't say it's the sexiest remote ever. If you have even a Cyrus amp these days, or a name amp. They're much nicer, and they sort of light up, and when you go near them, and all of those trendy things.
Yes, I know that impresses you an awful lot.
It does. I like that. I like that a lot. But it's functional. It works.
Yeah.
The volume step on the remote is very smooth.
Yeah.
It's not sort of oh my god, it's either on or off.
Yeah.
And I actually think they look really nice too. I think they're really good looking amplifiers. They sort of look great in the system. Nice bit of minimalism, and just sort of sit there and do their job really.
Well, I like the preamp especially because it doesn't have a display.
Yes.
So being the Luddite that I am, I don't want lots of things flashing at me all the time.
No, sure.
And I don't want to go into the sub menu and change, what's flashing at me.
There's no VU meters, but apart from that.
So you're distraught about that, I would imagine.
I'm very used to the exposure minimalism and like it very much, and also used to the sound. And as you say, it fits in really nicely with the sound.
Yeah.
They play all sorts of music really well. This is what I've found, and I know this is going to sound really obvious, but the better the recording, the better they sound. It really does sort of really bring it out. They can be quite analytical in that respect, and also, unfortunately, the opposite is the truth. If you have a crappy recording, then they sort of show it up for what it is.
Yeah.
They don't really sort of mask anything. They sort of give it to you warts and all. So. But really lovely, really great.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's not the most kind of forensically revealing, but it still tells you an awful lot, I think. And, I really struggle to think at 3,200 quid for how could you get something that has more detail, bigger, wider soundstage, better stage depth, and of course the driving ability, the sort of load driving and general thump and kind of muscularity of the amp. And as ever, Exposure is sticking with its guns. It's Class AB. It's not the sort of it's not your kind of Class D. Sort of newcomer.
No.
That they're not trying to reinvent the wheel or anything.
No, they're doing what they do well.
Yeah, and it's not sort of super delicate and fine and precise, but fussy Class A either. It will it'll drive real loads with real thump, and I'd imagine the ATC SCM40s actually would
yes, that would work brilliantly, because we had those with the 3510 integrated,
and it really
loved those. Yeah, they sounded amazing actually.
Yeah.
These are sort of a bit more sort of V8 powered.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. If these were a car, they'd be like a normally aspirated V8.
Yes.
Probably like a 3-litre V8 or something like that.
Exactly.
And loads of grunt, loads of bottom end.
Triumph Stag.
Oh, absolutely.
So, no, okay, maybe not.
We've got to be careful with our cars because, we mentioned your TR7 in one of our riffs, and we got quite a few nasty comments about that.
Yes, well, that's because I think you were encouraging them, weren't they?
That probably was. Well, you chose the wrong car. So what could I say? You should have gone for the nice Italian sports car.
Well, was there ever one?
Oh, okay, there we go.
Fix it again, Tony.
Can anybody name a nice Italian sports car? Yeah, it's a really difficult one.
So don't spend too much time thinking about it. Life will pass you by.
No,
anyway,
quite.
Anyway, so actually, if you're using the car metaphor, then it's a kind of, because it's old. It's a relatively old. It's old-fashioned, traditional. So, and it's torquey and it's smooth and it's got power, but it's not crazy. I think a Rover V8.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
So Rover 3500 V8 or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great shout.
Just does the job brilliantly, timeless, and so on.
And we've both owned one of those as well, haven't we?
Yeah.
In our time.
Yes, and that's why we don't have any money now.
No, quite. That's very true. That's right. Rover V8s and Hi-Fi had to bankrupt you. We should do financial advice. All you have to do is the opposite of what we do, and you'll be very wealthy.
Yes, absolutely.
But no, really good. Really love this. Quite obviously, and it's been a great thing to have and to listen to. So thanks, Exposure, for lending these to us. And let's do a riffometer on it. What do you reckon?
Yep.
Out of 10.
So I think for me, the combination has got to be 9. It's old school, unreconstructed, high quality, Class AB muscle, isn't it?
Yes.
But it's not a kind of thuggish kind of sound. It's delicate and musical, and subtle as well. And it'll drive pretty much any speaker you've got, unless you're weird or strange about speakers, what's not to like. The only thing you can criticize it for is that it's not full of the latest kind of gadgets and gizmos, but you don't want that if you buy an exposure pre-power, do you?
You could buy these and having not listened to them and almost be guaranteed you're going to like them.
Yeah.
They really are that good. I think they they've got mass market appeal for an incredibly high quality product. I'm going to go a little bit further. I'm going to give it 9.5.
Wow.
My 0.5 drop is for the remote because it just is a little bit plasticky and a bit naff. But that's it. That's the only criticism I've really got of it.
Pathetic, Mike. So
sorry.
Real amps don't have remotes anyway.
None of my exposure stuff do. I should probably take that back, shouldn't I? Because actually, it's quite a nice luxury to have, sit in your armchair and listen to these things.
Yeah.
But no, really good, really great. Particularly these ones with the moving coil input.
Yeah.
You certainly won't be disappointed with that either. You won't need an external moving coil stage. Just works a treat. So exposure. There we go. Great job. Good Hi-Fi Riff. Thank you very much indeed for watching. And we'll very much look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thanks very much. Bye. Bye.